Okay, so Anthropic just released Claude Opus 4.7, and this seems to be a very interesting release. It surpasses Opus 4.6 on a number of key benchmarks, especially when it comes to coding. It seems to have better instruction following capabilities. Also, multimodal understanding capabilities have improved substantially. It's able to use files as a memory system much better, and seems to be trained for self-verification during code generation. They also introduced a few new changes and parameters in the API and platform. Now, even though in benchmarks it's surpassing GPT 5.4 and Opus 4.6, still I would say this release is pretty interesting. The first one is timing. So they dropped the model around 7:30 a.m., which is very, very unusual for Anthropic. A potential reason is that probably we're going to see an OpenAI later in the morning. Now, unlike the previous releases, they basically announced it on X with a simple thread without any demos or anything. So it definitely feels like a rushed release. They recently released a preview of Mythos, and with this release they are directly comparing the two models as well, which is pretty interesting. So the first thing is very clear. Mythos preview is a much stronger model overall. Opus 4.7 is better at agentic coding compared to Opus 4.6. However, if you look at the agentic tool use benchmarks, this is where the difference does not seem to be that high, especially for agentic search, scale tool use. Agentic computer use is actually pretty close to Mythos. Now, in the blog post, they say that last week when they released Mythos preview, the release itself was pretty limited. Now, for Opus 4.7, the cyber capabilities are not as advanced as those of Mythos preview, and that's why I think Anthropic is comfortable releasing it. Now, they're saying that we are releasing Opus 4.7 with safeguards that automatically detects and blocks requests that indicate prohibited or high-risk cyber issues or uses. But this is the same class of model as Opus 4.6 because the API pricing is exactly the same as the previous generation. Now, some interesting things if you're thinking of using this model. So first is instruction following. According to Anthropic, Opus 4.7 takes the instructions literally, which is different than the previous iteration where the previous models interpreted instructions loosely or skips part entirely. If you use the same instructions for Opus 4.7, you might see some unexpected results. And that's why they say that users should retune their prompts and harness accordingly. Now, this is one of the issues that we have had with large language models, that with every iteration, you as a user have to really go back and look at whether it's going to follow the instructions the same way as the previous iteration. And that also sometimes involve adjusting your harness around the model. Second, according to Anthropic, it has improved multimodal, which means it has better vision for high resolution images. Now, multimodal is an important part of any agentic workflow. So if you are working with documents, you're going to see a lot of multimodal data. So in an agentic use case, it surpasses Opus 4.6 substantially on multimodal agentic use case. And you can also see a substantial difference between the performance depending on the resolution of the input data. Now keep in mind, high resolution images will be more accurate, but will incur more tokens as well, and hence is going to be more costly. Now, another thing that they have highlighted is that Opus 4.6 is better at using file system based memory. This is important, especially for coding agents. Claude Code, for example, relies completely on files for its memory system. So it seems like they are going in that direction and really focusing on file system as a memory rather than using semantic similarity type of approaches that other providers are exploring. Now, based on the benchmarks that they have provided, it seems to have better document reasoning, and I think this is improved by the fact that it has better multimodal reasoning capabilities now. Also, it seems to have the same context window of 1 million token, but with a relatively better reasoning across that context window. Now, an important benchmark that they have added is the vending bench 2. Seems to have a much better long-term coherence, and it's much more profitable compared to Opus 4.6. Okay, then one interesting aspect of the benchmarks that they have shared. So when it comes to multimodal understanding, on their internal benchmarks, it sees a substantial difference. On external ones, you might not see a big of a difference. Now, one thing, if you're going to be moving or migrating from Opus 4.6 to 4.7, there are a couple of things that you need to consider. The first one is the tokenizer. So Opus 4.7 uses an updated tokenizers that improve how the model processes text. The trade-off is that the same input can map to more tokens, which is roughly or can be up to 1.35 times depending on the content type. Second, Opus 4.7 thinks more at a higher effort levels, particularly on later turns in the agentic system. This improves its reliability on hard problems, but does mean it produces more output tokens, and hence we are going to be burning through our rate limits much faster. So this is something that you definitely want to keep an eye on if you are going to be moving from Opus 4.6 to 4.7. Okay, so this brings us to some new settings that they have introduced. So Opus 4.6 introduces extra high effort between high and max, and by default in Cloud Code, the effort level is now extra high. If you go to Cloud Code, the default for Opus 4.6 is medium, which showed a degradation in performance where a lot of people are complaining. So I think Anthropic is trying to address that with a default of extra high. However, having this default also means that you're going to be burning through your tokens a lot quicker. Now on Cloud API, they have added support for high resolution images, and they are also launching task budgets in public beta, giving developers a way to guide Cloud's token spend so it can prioritize work across longer terms. They're also introducing something called Ultra Review, which is a slash command that produces a dedicated review session that reads through changes and flag bugs and design issues that a careful reviewer would catch. So one thing, if you are going to be using this for coding, you need to make sure to set the proper effort level, because setting the proper effort level is going to be helpful. However, be mindful of the extra tokens that you are going to be burning through in the process. Okay, so one thing which I noticed at the end is that SweBench multimodal, they say we use an internal implementation for both Opus 4.6 and 4.7. Scores are not directly comparable to public leaderboards scores. So there seems to be some benching tricks happening in here. Anyways, this was a quick update. I do expect that there's going to be an OpenAI release this morning. If that happens, I am going to create and put out another quick video. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you in the next one.